What if everything you've been taught about God was upside down? What if the God you were told to fear, the one who demanded sacrifice and punishment, wasn't the true Father Jesus came to reveal? Stay with me, because this truth could change your entire relationship with the divine. In today's video, we're exploring one of the most challenging questions in faith: the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, versus the Father that Jesus spoke of. What if these two figures are not the same? What if Jesus came to reveal a different kind of God, one full of love, not fear? Get ready for a revelation that could reshape your understanding of the divine and your place in God's kingdom. We'll uncover hidden truths from ancient teachings, dive into the role of Jesus in revealing a new, intimate relationship with God, and explore why the thunderous, wrathful God of the Old Testament doesn't align with the loving Father Jesus called Abba. This video will challenge what you thought you knew about God, faith, and your personal connection with the divine. Stay tuned for powerful insights that may just awaken something deep inside you. 1. Yahweh's wrathful God versus Jesus' loving Father. In the Old Testament, we encounter Yahweh, a God often portrayed with fire, judgment, and wrath. He commands Israel with an iron fist, punishes disobedience severely, and demands sacrifice and blood. The God of thunder and smoke who strikes down cities and floods the earth can easily evoke fear and trembling. We are taught to bow in reverence, obey without question, and fear his wrath. But if we look closely, something doesn't sit right. Is this the same God Jesus called Father? Jesus never once called Yahweh his Father. Instead, he used the word Abba, a term of deep intimacy, closer to Papa or Daddy than God or Lord. Abba signifies a relationship of love, trust, and closeness. This is the God Jesus came to reveal, not a distant, vengeful king, but a loving, compassionate Father who knows and cares for his children. Jesus' relationship with God was based on love and connection, not fear and control. When Jesus teaches us to pray, he doesn't start with Almighty and terrible God, but with our Father who art in heaven. Matthew chapter 6:9. The very first words he speaks about God are filled with tenderness, an invitation into a loving relationship. In Luke chapter 11:2, he tells us to pray, Abba, Father, highlighting the personal, intimate connection that's available to all of us. Through Jesus, the harsh, judgmental image of God is shattered. The Father he speaks of is not a figure to be feared, but a presence to be embraced. Let's pause and think about the implications of this. For centuries, we've been taught that God is a king in the sky, distant, separate, demanding obedience. But what if Jesus' life and teachings are revealing a different truth? A God who is near, not far. A Father who cares for his children, who longs to hold them in his arms, and who yearns for his creation to flourish in peace and love. Imagine a world where God is not a figure of terror, but of deep, unconditional love. The shift from Yahweh, the punishing God, to the Father that Jesus called Abba is monumental. It's a shift that changes how we approach God, how we see ourselves, and how we relate to the world. No longer are we merely servants bound by laws. We are beloved children, invited into a family where grace and love are the foundation of our relationship with God. 2. The hidden truths about Yahweh's name. The name Yahweh holds a sacred place in the Bible. Often feared, it was considered so holy that it was not spoken aloud, and for centuries, many believed it held a power that could not be trifled with. But what if the true essence of this name was never meant to be spoken at all? What if the name of God wasn't meant to be a word, but a presence, a rhythm that flows through our very breath? In Exodus 3:14, when Moses asks God his name, God responds with, I am who I am. This profound declaration reveals that God's essence is not something that can be contained in a mere name or title. The sacred letters of Yahweh, Yod He Vav He, have no vowels, making them impossible to pronounce in the traditional sense. Instead, these letters represent the breath of life itself, a divine rhythm that sustains all of creation. Yahweh's name, in its truest form, is not a sound or a title to be feared, but a pulse, an energy, a life force that flows through every living thing. In ancient traditions, this name was felt in the breath. Every inhale and exhale became a sacred act, connecting humans to the divine. It wasn't about speaking or pronouncing the name correctly, but about experiencing the very presence of God in every moment of life. The early church, however, took this sacred understanding and turned it into something external. They made the divine something to be feared and controlled. Yahweh's name became a tool used to establish religious authority, with rules and rituals that placed the divine at a distance. Instead of seeing God as an ever-present force within us, we were taught to look outside ourselves for God's approval, His punishment, and His favor. But what if the truth is different? What if God's name is not about ritual, but about connection? The mystics always knew this truth, that God's presence is not locked in a temple or a holy name, but is experienced in the very act of being. The name Yahweh is not just a symbol of a distant God. It's a reminder that God is closer than our next breath. He is in us, with us, and surrounding us. We don't need a priest to invoke His presence. We just need to breathe, to recognize that God is already here, living within us. By understanding Yahweh not as a name to be feared, but as the sacred breath of life, we begin to reclaim the intimate connection with the divine that was lost through centuries of religious control. This awareness invites us to remember our divine nature and to recognize that we are part of the very life force that sustains the universe. 3. The spiritual betrayal and illusion. For centuries, religious systems have built an illusion that distorts our relationship with God. The teachings we were given about Yahweh were not about an intimate, loving Father, but about a distant, authoritative figure who demanded our obedience through fear. The system that developed around Yahweh didn't encourage a personal connection with the divine. It focused on ritual, sacrifice, and control. People were told they were sinners, unworthy of God's love, and that they had to earn His favor through acts of obedience and fear. But this is where the betrayal happened. The true nature of God was hidden behind rules, rituals, and institutions that taught us to be afraid, to bow down in fear of divine punishment, and to offer sacrifices for our sins. Instead of leading people into freedom and a deeper relationship with God, the system trapped them in cycles of guilt, shame, and fear. This betrayal didn't just affect individuals, it impacted entire communities and cultures, pushing people further away from the loving, compassionate Father Jesus came to reveal. In Matthew 23:13, Jesus speaks directly to the religious leaders of His time, calling them out for their hypocrisy and their role in distorting God's true nature. "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites!" He accuses them of locking the door to the kingdom of heaven and not allowing others to enter. They had built a system that excluded people from the divine truth, turning God into a figure who was too distant, too holy, and too demanding to be accessible. This system also led to the idea that God was to be feared, not loved. People were taught that their worth was based on how well they obeyed rules, not on how deeply they were loved by their Creator. As a result, the divine became an external force, distant and unreachable rather than an internal presence. God living within, always available, always present. But Jesus came to break this system apart. He didn't come to affirm this religious order or its rules. He came to expose the illusion that kept people bound by fear and separation. Jesus revealed that God is not a tyrant, but a loving Father who wants to be known, not as a figure in a distant sky, but as a personal, intimate presence in our lives. As Jesus dismantled these systems of fear and sacrifice, He invited people to see God differently, not as a ruler demanding their obedience, but as a Father who longs for them to return home. His life and teachings weren't just about breaking laws. They were about breaking the illusion of a God who was far away and reminding us that the true God is already with us, in us, and for us. 4. Jesus' radical revolution of faith. Jesus did not come to reinforce the old system of laws and rituals. He didn't come to make the rules of Yahweh more palatable. Instead, he came to tear down the walls of religious control, to expose the truth, and to show us a completely different way of relating to God. Jesus' message was radical. He wasn't simply softening the law, he was dismantling it entirely. In Matthew 5:38-39, Jesus challenges the Old Testament law of an eye for an eye. He says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." This teaching was revolutionary. It contradicted everything the religious system had taught about justice and retribution. Instead of punishment, Jesus spoke of grace and forgiveness, of turning away from the cycle of violence and revenge. Jesus went on to heal on the Sabbath, to touch the untouchable, to forgive sins without rituals or sacrifices. He healed the sick, welcomed outcasts, and even broke bread with those society considered unworthy. These were acts of defiance against the religious system, which taught that purity, adherence to laws, and sacrifices were the only way to please God. Jesus showed us that God's love didn't operate within those constraints. His love was unconditional, unearned, and open to all. In doing this, Jesus wasn't just breaking the laws of the Old Testament. He was showing us that the true nature of God isn't about rituals or sacrifices, but about compassion, forgiveness, and love. Jesus directly confronted the sacrificial system. He forgave sins without the need for bloodshed or offerings, something that was unthinkable in the religious system of his time. This was the beginning of the end for the sacrificial system, the very heart of Yahweh's law. By choosing love over the law, forgiveness over sacrifice, and mercy over judgment, Jesus turned the religious world upside down. His teachings and actions revealed a God who is not concerned with rituals and punishment, but with the restoration of relationships. God desires mercy, not sacrifice. Jesus came to show us that living in God's love doesn't require following rigid laws. It requires following his example, showing love, kindness, and forgiveness in every moment. Jesus didn't come to build a new religion. He came to free us from the old one. He broke the illusion that God is a distant ruler, and he showed us a Father who is near, who is love, and who desires an intimate relationship with each of us. 5. Gnostic teachings, the true nature of God. In the early centuries of Christianity, many teachings and scriptures were hidden, suppressed, or destroyed by the church. Among these were the Gnostic Gospels, texts that reveal a radically different understanding of God and the divine. According to Gnostic teachings, the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, was not the true creator, but a false god, a being who misled humanity into worshipping a distorted version of the divine. The Gnostics referred to this figure as the Demiurge, a blind and ignorant deity who believed himself to be the one true God. In their view, this deity was born from a cosmic error, a rupture in the divine order. The Demiurge's arrogance led him to create a world of matter, illusion, and control, a world that keeps people trapped in fear, sin, and ignorance. This world, the Gnostics believed, was ruled by Yahweh. This is where the chilling part of the story comes in. According to the Gnostics, Yahweh was not only an ignorant God, but a jealous one. He believed himself to be the only source of life and power. His creation of the world, full of rules and hierarchies, was not an act of love, but an attempt to trap the divine spark within a false reality. In John 8:44, Jesus confronts the religious elite, saying, "You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires." These words are not directed at pagans or sinners, but at the priests and teachers of the law. In Gnostic thought, Jesus was calling out the religious leaders for serving the Demiurge, a god of fear and control, not the true loving Father he came to reveal. The Gnostics taught that the true God is not a God of judgment, rules, and violence, but a God of light, wisdom, and love. This divine source, often referred to as the true God, is beyond all earthly concepts of power and control. It is not a God who demands obedience, but one who calls humanity to remember their true nature, to awaken to the divine light within them. For the Gnostics, the ultimate goal was liberation, not salvation through rituals or sacrifices, but through the awakening of the soul. They believed that once we recognize the false nature of the Demiurge, we can transcend the world he created and return to the true source of light, wisdom, and love. This is the message that Jesus was conveying, not just to forgive our sins, but to awaken us to the truth of who we truly are and where we come from. 6. Christ's final act, breaking the illusion. Jesus' final act on the cross wasn't about appeasing a wrathful God. It was about breaking the illusion that had kept humanity bound in fear, sin, and separation. His death was not a payment to a distant, angry deity, but a powerful declaration that the system of fear and sacrifice had come to an end. Jesus didn't die to satisfy God's need for bloodshed. He died to destroy the false systems of control that had been built around the divine. In John 14:6, Jesus declares, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." These words aren't just a theological statement, they are a radical invitation to break free from the illusion of a God who demands obedience through fear and sacrifice. Jesus isn't saying that he is the only path to salvation in the sense of religious exclusivity. He's saying that through him, we come to understand the true nature of God, a loving, intimate Father who doesn't require rituals, blood, or punishment to accept us. When Jesus is pressed further about his identity, he claims oneness with the divine. He boldly declares, "I am," echoing the name of God from Exodus 3:14. In this moment, Jesus isn't merely quoting scripture, he's embodying it. He is revealing that the divine presence is not a distant force, but something living, breathing, and active within him. When he says, "I am," he is speaking of the same divine essence that exists in all of us, calling us to awaken to our true identity as children of a loving Father. This moment of revelation is crucial. Jesus wasn't just a martyr or a victim. He was the one who came to awaken humanity to the truth of God's nature. Through his life, teachings, and ultimate sacrifice, Jesus exposed the false systems of religion that had kept people trapped in fear. He showed us that God is not a ruler to be feared, but a Father to be embraced. The cross, rather than being a symbol of wrath, becomes a symbol of liberation, of breaking the chains of religious control and returning to the heart of the Father. Jesus' final words, "It is finished," signify the end of the illusion. The systems of fear, sacrifice, and control are over. The true God, the one Jesus revealed, is not a deity of violence and retribution, but one of peace, love, and forgiveness. His death was the ultimate act of defiance against the idea that God needs our suffering. Instead, he calls us to embrace his love, to live in the freedom of knowing we are his children, and to pass that love on to others. Conclusion. As we've explored, the God revealed through Jesus is not the same as the God depicted in the Old Testament, the God of wrath, judgment, and sacrifice. The God Jesus called Abba, our loving Father, offers us something radically different: intimacy, grace, and unconditional love. Jesus didn't come to reinforce the old system of fear and control, but to break through it, showing us that the divine is not distant but deeply present within us, in every breath we take. Through his life, death, and resurrection, Jesus shattered the illusion that God is a distant ruler demanding obedience. He unveiled a Father who is near, a Father who desires a relationship built on love, not rituals, on mercy, not punishment. The truth Jesus revealed is not just a theological concept. It's an invitation to live a life free from fear, shame, and guilt. It's an invitation to remember who we truly are, beloved children of a divine Father, created in love and called to live in his light. But this truth isn't just for us to hold on to. It's a truth we're meant to share. As we awaken to the love of God within us, we're called to pass that love on to others. This is what it means to live out the gospel, not by imposing rules or rituals, but by embodying the love, forgiveness, and grace that Jesus demonstrated. The world needs this message now more than ever. So let's ask ourselves, how are we living as children of a loving Father? Are we still trapped in systems of fear, or have we embraced the freedom of God's love? Let's reflect on the truth we've uncovered today, and let it inspire us to live in a way that reflects the love and grace we've received. If this message resonates with you, share it. Let others know they don't need to fear a wrathful God, but that the true God is one who loves them, who calls them his own, and who desires to walk with them every step of the way. Like, comment, and subscribe to continue exploring the truths that set us free. Remember, you are not alone on this journey, and the light of God is within you.